Thank you so much, Amy. And we're going to have a panel after this, so there'll be a chance to hear more from our speakers. Our next speaker is the Honorable Jamal T. Foxx. Jamal was born in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and was raised in Greensboro, North Carolina. He received his bachelor's degree in political science from North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University, and a master's degree in public administration from Capella University. In 2013, after working 3 years for the city manager in the city of Greensboro, Jamal was first elected to the Greensboro City Council representing District 2 as the youngest ever elected official in Greensboro, North Carolina. In 2015, he was re-elected to the Greensboro City Council and served through 2017. He's also a former North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University political science adjunct professor, and a social studies and leadership teacher at Guilford County Schools. He's also a community advocate, a youth mentor, and has been a political leader in North Carolina. But we are now fortunate to have Jamal in Portland. He moved here, I think, last August to marry a Portlander, and now he's currently serving as a property and business development manager for Portland Parks and Recreation. And he also serves on the Oregon Commission on Black Affairs. Welcome, Jamal.
Good morning. Let's do that again, because I don't feel the energy. Good morning.
Good morning.
That's the Portland spirit. Well, I wanted to say thank you, Jim, and Healthy Democracy, the panel. Thank you all for allowing me the honor to be with you today, talk about a great project that's going across the nation and in many communities, participatory budgeting. You'll continue to see this slide over and over, as many of us will continue to put it out there. But one of the things I want to talk through the lens today as a former elected official, as well as a professor of political science and a social studies and teen leadership teacher at the high school level. One of the things that I also want to share with you before I get started is I want to give you just Greensboro in general. Give you a little context before I get into this presentation. Greensboro is a city of 300,000 individuals. We're a district-based system where we have 5 city elected districts. We have 3 at-large members and the mayor at large. It's called the 5-3-1 system. One of the things that we looked at over 5-6 years ago was how do we get communities of color and the greater community at large more involved into the city's process of how we spend dollars. One of the things that we heard continuously from the community is, you're not investing in my community. And as elected officials, the first thing we go to is say, well, let me show you this chart. Let me show you where the investment is, right? And the community said, no, it's not about equality, it's about equity. It's about the quality of work and where you invest those dollars. And so we had to take a real hard look at the way that we do things in Greensboro. So the community, and they packed our city council chambers month after month, week after week. We had 2 meetings a month on the first and third Tuesday of every month, and it was packed. The community saying that we need a seat at the table. Many of us who ran on a platform before I was elected in 2013, I was teaching this to my college students about budgets, how to get involved. And one of the things I always stated when I do presentations is, if you're not at the seat of the table, you're on the menu. And too long, our communities, whether communities of color, have been on the menu. And if they don't give you a seat at the table, well, you get you a fold-up chair and you make one. That's democracy. And so, talking about that in that context, a lot of people got really excited. But we had to think about what we're going to do. And so it's real decisions, real money, real power. What do we do from here? One of the things after we got elected, we got a call from President Obama, and myself and another colleague had to go to the White House with a lot of leaders to talk about participatory budgeting and what we're doing in our communities to make sure that we have people at the table. From that, we went back to the community. We said, hey, we need to do this. We need people at the table. One of the hard things for elected officials is to give up power. And one of the things that we had to do is really take a hard look. Do we really want people to get involved in our public process? And we did. So to start this out, we had to look at our budget. We had a $534 million budget in the city of Greensboro. And so we were trying to push, and I was one of the members, said, hey, let's do 5% of our budget. Well, that didn't work because we couldn't get majority of us on council to agree to 5%. Then we said, well, let's do 1%. Well, we couldn't get a lot of people to agree to 1%. So we said, hey, you know what? Let's do $500,000, $100,000 each. And that was an idea that came from our city manager at the time. And so we started out with $1,000 per district. And that helped, but we needed expertise. And so we worked out with the Participatory Budgeting Project nationally to have them come into our community and craft what we can use in our community. And it cost us about $200,000 to craft the different things that I'm going to share with you today. But through this, we were able to develop people in the community, new leaders that were never involved in the process, that felt like government really didn't care about them, that they didn't matter. And so we were able to bring them in the process. And we ended up through PB hiring 2 local community residents to lead us and lead PB in Greensboro. Greensboro had 4 different goals. The first goal was equity, empowerment, community building, and transparency. And so the timeline that you see from we started the process late 2015 and all the way through voting through 2016. One of the things to get us through this process, we said, okay, we have $100,000 per district. How are we going to divvy up the projects? How are we going to develop the ideas? How are we going to reach out to the community? Well, I will tell you, we had 80 PB events throughout our community. Each council member were able to select 2 members each. You see 18 members up there, so all 9 of us on our council got to select 2 people from the community to represent our district, and at-large members, because they were at-large, they were able to select cross districts. And these individuals were the initial steering committee to help us create and draft what our PB process was. And through this process, we had 80 PB events and over 800 surveys that we actually did. What we found out, normally in North Carolina, our regular voting process for elected officials, whether at the city, county, or school board, normally only got us about maybe 5 to 7% people who voted. And good elections, maybe 11 to 13%. But what we found out in this PB process, we had more people that got involved in the process because they wanted to know how we were spending their tax dollars in their communities, where were our priorities, and did the city council's priority align with the community's priorities. So that steering committee that I shared with you, those 18 individuals, they created a handbook. And in that handbook, I don't have many copies, but I'm going to share with you a link that you can look at. Within that handbook, they created roles and responsibilities, how we're going to do the voting, the locations where we're going to have the voting. We had expos in every community center, in every community. We went to churches. We tried to meet people where they were. And at the end of the day, we started with, well, we'll have people as young as 11 years old vote in the process. Well, that caused a little controversy on council, and a lot of people disagreed. Well, someone that's 11 years old, they're still learning. They shouldn't be part of the process, and we end up negotiating to limit it to 14 years of age and over. And part of the process, you see proof of residency, government IDs, green cards, student IDs, bills, bank statements, because you had to vote in your district. I couldn't be in District 2 and come over into District 3 and vote, which was around the downtown portion. It wasn't allowed. We had volunteers that helped us. We had many volunteers, and many of those volunteers became the budget delegates that helped us take the ideas in and craft what the proposals were going to be. And so from September 2015 to May, we had 1,100 residents that voted, 40 volunteer budget delegates, and more than 50 community outreach opportunities that were created throughout this period of time. We had 26 winning projects, and a lot of those projects stem from murals on the buildings to some sidewalks in their communities to park benches to one of the most controversial projects were chessboards that cost about $50,000 that one community selected that they wanted. And we went back and forth on council. Did it make sense to spend $50,000 to be able to get that chessboard? And so moving forward, our steering committee evaluation, there were some great evaluations that came from our steering committee. And I'm going to share with you some of the things that were stated. PB allowed a different type of person an equal opportunity to participate for a change. What was so great was not only my ideas, but all the other ideas. It was good to see other people involved at the table. This is such an important process that has huge potential to get folks feeling more connected and one another, and potentially a greater opportunity for authentic citizen empowerment. And the staff person that actually helped our budget office, this process included more community members, and they actually develop a deeper understanding of the budget and the amount of work that goes into what staff does. My favorite part was seeing people get injected into the city process. Most of the times when we talked about budget in Greensboro, we would go into and we had district budget meetings. You know how many people would come to those budget meetings? Maybe 3, maybe 5. And we always wondered, well, what are we doing wrong where we can't get majority of our constituency to come out to learn about the process? Well, first is outreach, advocacy. We was not reaching them where they are. We wasn't going into the churches. We wasn't doing what we needed to do. We thought that we can craft a press release. We could put it on Facebook and Twitter, and that's it. That's all we had to do. You know, we met the public announcement rules. No, we had to do more. And one of the things that we develop in this process, and I'm going to share with you very shortly, is you have to create a simulator so people can understand how much is your city's budget, and then ask them to go in and figure out how do you balance a budget. A lot of times, particularly in communities of color, they don't know anything about budgets. A lot of us don't. We don't know how they're spent. What does general fund mean? What are some other funds that your community has? Are those funds being adequately addressed across the community and not in some communities? And that's some of the things that we talked about. And we had UNCG who did the evaluation for us in Greensboro, and they were huge advocates. We saw that students at the college level were really enthused and excited because it was the first time that they felt like they mattered and they cared in their community. Because they said, hey, you guys are spending our tax dollars and telling us what you're going to do with it. That's not fair. We need to change this dynamic. We need to be involved throughout the process, and we need to tell you what we want in our communities. You don't live here. You can't come over and say, well, we gave you sidewalks this year. What more do you want? Well, we want a lot more because too long in Greensboro, a lot of communities were cast away, put to a side, and they felt like they didn't matter or didn't care. So one of the recommendations that came last year before I left is how do we do things differently? How do we change the process up where it's more fair? And so adjusting the timeline, clarifying the roles and responsibility, the budget delegates, what is your role? Steering committee, what is your role? Elected officials, what is your role? How are we going to set up voting? And a lot of times the voting was at the community centers throughout Greensboro, and it was electronic voting. So we had computers there so you can come in and you can vote. And then we also had paper forms. And we extended the times that we were in these communities to give people an opportunity to come out and vote. A lot of times it's hardworking people, and their hours, they could work first shift, sometimes third shift. So we had to be flexible on the weekends, after night, to be able to get an opportunity to come out and vote and tell us how they want their tax dollars to be spent. So we changed up our process before I left Greensboro. So now the process improvements we looked at between that January, March period of time, and then we collected the ideas between April and May. Then we start the vetting process after that period of time through September. The community expos is where we use the opportunity to really talk about PB, to educate people, to get them to understand what PB is. And a lot of times, the elected officials we had to do as well, so we fully understand exactly our role and how we can participate. And then we actually had the voting process. One of the things that I'm going to share is looking at the demographics. So out of the 2,000 people that were involved in Cycle 1, 85% of those individuals were new to the process, had no clue to city budgeting, and were never really involved. One of the things we saw were 18 to 24-year-olds and 25 to 44-year-olds were really the area of more respondents that we got response from. Interesting enough, it's like regular elections, you see more women voting, right? Well, in this process, it's no different. More women voted in PB. The only time that we had more males that were involved in the process was as a budget delegate, helping craft and pull together the ideas. When we start looking at education, bachelor's degree and graduate degrees and higher were the education levels. The annual household income were between $10,000 and $74,000 were the respondents that replied. And we had a majority of minority communities that were involved. 51% of the respondents were white, and everything else were the different from Asian, Black, African American, Hispanic, or Latino. Interesting enough, when you start looking at Greensboro's demographics as a whole, it's 51% white, and it's 48% minority, 42% black. So when we start looking at these demographics, it was very interesting, and the responses, who responded, where they responded. But it was exciting for us when we went through this process. If you click this second one, I'm going to show you the Greensboro City Council districts. So, yeah, second one first. So with the city council districts, when I was a city council member, I represented 60,000 people, and I represented District 2. But each of the districts was, give or take, plus or minus 5,000. So each district was about 60,000 residents that you represented. And when you actually went through the budget simulator, it asks you which districts were you in. And so District 2, this green here, is the district that I represented, which is the second largest district in Greensboro. But when you went through the budget simulator and everything you did, when we collected surveys, all 800 surveys, it asked you to put your district and other demographic information that we need so we can see who's responding to us. If you click on the simulator. So PB was one process for us, okay? Another process was, okay, we go through the PB process, we get you involved, but do you know anything about our budget? Where are our funds? Where do they go? Follow the money. I always tell people that, follow the money. So in this process, right now, it started out balanced, if you scroll down some, but you're able to click, like you click on public safety, and let's take public safety down a couple million. And scroll down some. I'm not advocating that we, this is just the first one that I went to. Let's scroll down. Let me get out of public safety. I don't want to, let's go to general government. And let's take general government up some. And so you see up here, you have a surplus of 3.1 million. But the idea is for you to balance the budget, and what you do is, in these buckets, you can either take it up or you can take it down. And after this, you submit it. There's a survey information, and in that information, you will let us know these are your priorities. It will come to our budget office, and our budget office will put together all this information for City Council. So when it's time for us to sit down and talk about our budgets, we understand where the community is coming from. This does not negate us from going into the community. Every budget section that we have, we take this simulator out, and we normally get you to take your phones out, put in Balancing Act Greensboro, and we could do a live budget session right now. But I didn't want to do that today, but that's something that you can do. But that's another piece to PB that we had to create on the front end and back end, so you can understand how the process worked. Another leg, if you go to the next slide. Real money, real power. So, as I conclude, the budget simulator is something awesome to have. If your communities don't, this is an area that you can advocate, for your city budget office to create. The PB process is hugely important to make sure that you have the right voices at the table to be able to get involved and sit down with elected officials. This process takes elected officials figuring out how they can lessen the amount of power that they have to be able to give the opportunity for the community to be at the table. And then the last piece for us is, once we did these two, we had to figure out, we had a community board process many years ago, 40 years prior, where CBOs, nonprofits would come to the city council and say, I want 40,000. So our city council will go and try to pick winners and losers. And a year and a half ago, we said, we're not doing this anymore. We got to get out of the business of doing this piece here. And so we created, just like the steering committee for PB, we chose members from the community to actually serve on this community board process to help us figure out how to divvy up those funds. And this community partners board process works with PB, which uses simulator every time they go out. So the community partners board, every time we had a budget, this board would come to us and say, these are the 10 CBOs that you should fund. City council, it took the politics out of it because we were really tired of people coming in complaining and yelling at us because we're picking winners and choosers. Whatever the board recommendation is, those were the CBOs that we actually funded into our budget. And that was our process in Greensboro. Thank you for the opportunity today, and I'll be around for any questions.